give Daniel a warm Satori welcome, and then we'll continue on and we'll have some fun.
You know, it's problematic for me to begin talking about consciousness because for the most part we don't have any idea what it really is. We can't really describe it in language. It's like the fish trying to describe water. Now there's a couple ideas about consciousness. That one is that it arises from our biochemical processes from our brain. Because we have a brain, we're conscious. How many buy that? I actually believe that in the panpsychic idea of consciousness, the idea that all that is arises from consciousness. We are aspects of a greater whole. Just like I can talk about my hand as being separate from, my other hand, it's only separate in conversation. It's only separate in my description or my observation of it. But it's really all part of my body, which is all giving off atoms, which are exchanging atoms in my environment. We're breathing in and out oxygen. Some of the oxygen that we breathe, Jesus and Muhammad and Buddha breathed. Energy never dissipates, it only recreates. So how is it I'm here talking about consciousness? My name is Daniel Novi. I'm originally from Michigan. I'm a Texas transplant. I have a relationship to snow that a lot of Texans don't. I love the sunshine here. Michigan is beautiful, but it's typically hazy due to the lake effect. I began my spiritual journey, I guess, when I was 13, and probably before that, but more decidedly when I was 13, because it was then that I kind of woke up. I had a Satori. Satori is awakened enlightenment, the awakened mind. Sudden awakening. I was 13, and it began rather innocently. My mother asked me, I just was turning 13, and my mother asked me if I wanted to have a birthday party. Because I hadn't had a birthday party since I was 7. Now I was going to be a teenager. Well, just like we assess any other threat, any other possibility or situation in a nanosecond, I realized that fast that I had very few friends that I wanted to invite to a party. I had very few people that I could invite that I thought would even show up. And like that fast I said, no, I'm not that interested. But I realized that there was something that had been asleep in me. I was 13. Most teenagers are asleep at the wheel all the time. But I became curious about what was I missing out on. Like, I was completely inside my own head for the most part. So I started studying how to win friends and influence people. And I became curious with this question, like, what is potential? Who am I, really? What is reality? What's the purpose of life? Does anyone know the purpose of life? We have some pretty good ideas. I have developed somewhat of a little theory over the years. Well, also at 13, I began studying hypnosis. I became intrigued with, remember Bela Lugosi, the vampire, Dracula? He had this damsel. It was like, look into my eyes. And she, oh. I said, I want to be able to do that. So I saved my paperboy money and I sent away for a little mail order book on hypnosis. How to hypnotize people, women, and animals. Now, it didn't dawn on me till much later that in the title of this book, women were not considered people. It was the 60s, or early 70s. I was born in 1960. So I began this inquiry on the aspects of the subconscious and the conscious mind, and what is in the basement. At the time when I was first learning, the subconscious was referred to as a deep, dark space. You don't really want to delve in the subconscious. I have a completely different respect and appreciation for the subconscious today. What you're consciously aware of any given moment is a gift from your other than conscious mind. It's based on your programming. It's based on the things that you've learned are important to pay attention to. It's things that you consider important in your experience of life. How many of you have ever thought about buying a new car or went to buy a new car because, hell, no one else is driving that, especially in that color, and you drive it off the lot, and before you know it, you see one on every corner. It seems like it is the only model car that ever sold that year. But it was off our radar because it was unimportant to us until we deemed it necessary. We'll come back and talk about the role of the conscious mind and the subconscious. But the title of this talk is The Play of Consciousness. And before I can get into that, I need to talk about before all of this and that we arrived, I consider that there was all that is. Infinity. Mass consciousness. Or a conscious universe. Possibly at that point, billions and billions and billions and billions of years ago, there were no planets. It was just the essence of possibility, of pure consciousness. In my meditations over the years, I've come to certain knowings for me. And again, before I go any further, nothing what I say tonight is true. It's not a lie either. It is my point of view. There's 7 billion people on the planet. 7 billion different points of view. No two people have the same set of experiences, perceptions, beliefs, values. Yet how many times do you talk to other people as if they had your brain? Or that you have maybe made a judgment about somebody else and like they got it wrong or they're not doing it right. Consider that every person on the planet has a valid point of view. Neither right nor wrong, but it is valid in their experience of life. So what I'm offering you today is my musings and meanderings over the last 40 plus years in trying to answer the questions about what is reality? What is our connection to all that is? My uncle was a Presbyterian minister, and I grew up in the church, and we lived just several doors down. So when I was 6, 7, and 8, that was my playground. I was in the pews and running around. Sometimes I'd sit there and I'd just look up at the picture of Jesus, and I would talk to God. And I developed a completely different, it's more Gnostic, a knowing, inner knowing of my relationship to a greater whole. So I'm considering all that is. So we can just call it all that is like it's one big entity. So all that is just existing. And since it's all that is, it doesn't really make any distinctions about its hand or its arm or metaphorically, because it just is aware of all that is. And just like you, all you know is all you know. And what you don't know, you don't know it. So I think somewhere in all that is arose a question of who am I? what am I? In the purity of that intention sprang forth the universe. You could consider it the Big Bang. Bang. And us, we are the result of an evolved intention over time. Now, why is it, or how is it, that, or in your design, if you look at your biological organization, what's reinforced in your living? There's basically two modes that we exist in. Defense, or preservation, survival, or growth. If we're caught up too long in survival, we tend to extinguish much sooner in our existence on the planet. Yet when we're in growth and expansion, it's biochemically reinforced with dopamine and endorphins, morphine-like substances created in the body that reinforces more learning. It feels good. That aha experience. So biologically, we're predetermined or pre-designed to reinforce learning and growth. So if we're just an aspect of all that is, I think that is also in all that is. A continual expansion and learning. Because when you're everything, the only way you can discover what you are is to create something you are not. And contrast it. So we as human beings live and exist from the beginning of our existence in this contrast. Because we're separated from all that is. Perhaps when we're very, very young, we still have a remembrance of that connection. But as we develop our brain and our sense of self at age 7 and 8, when we get our sense of identity and who we are in the world, and it's me and mine, we're now separate from all that is. Make sense so far? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, if I'm living in separateness, in my brain, our mind is a difference engine. It's constantly taking an assessment of what's going on and what's different in this picture. If I walk into a room, it's assessing, where's the threats? Who's the friendly animals? Who can I connect with? Oh, stay away from him. We develop right away that intuitive impulse about the environment, about other people, but our brain is constantly, am I comfortable? Am I uncomfortable? Is it hot? Is it too cold? Is it too bright? Is it just right? Am I tired? Am I full of energy? Do I need to eat? This is the animal aspect of your existence. Some people never really get out of that animal consciousness because it's reactive to the environment. When something happens, it's the truth. It is the way it is. On the enlightened or spiritual side, it's just, that's what happened. I can create what's next. The past doesn't necessarily determine the future. Yet from the animal mind, we're constantly in that struggle for that sense of self, for safety. Make sure I have all mine. So part of reconciling our existence or the spiritual path is coming to terms with our animalness, and not being ashamed of it. Oh, I'm going to come back here. For me, the purpose of life, the purpose of our life, is to lead. It's not to necessarily merge with all that is. That's the end result. How many of, I don't know if there's anybody here, but you may know people that they don't really want or enjoy the physical existence. They want to, like, this is my last life, damn it. I'm done. I gotta be done. Like, they want this to be their last life. They can't wait to transcend and be in a different sphere of consciousness. I've come to the conclusion for me that the purpose of life is to be to have the most amazingly conscious human existence I can have. And be in touch with the pain of and suffering of my own creation. And being able to recognize, oh, that's my mind doing that. And then make a conscious choice about it. In my relationships, realizing that I create my relationships. If my friend Andy is a son of a bitch, that's my interpretation of him. I'm creating him as a son of a bitch. He is the way he is. I drew him in my life. I am the one generating my relationship with him. If I'm not generating my relationship or my life, my experience, then I'm at the mercy and victimized in the world. I might as well give up or just protect myself. That's more the animal consciousness. Wouldn't you agree? So if I create it, how do I create it? Do you ever live outside your mind?
Sometimes.
You see, you can only interpret the world through your five senses. Visually, auditorily, kinesthetically, or sensation, gustatory, or olfactory. These are the five representational or representational systems. So we take what's happening out there and we represent it in our head and we code it in a way to make a map of the world. Because we can't fit everything out here in our head one-to-one. Because it would just be the world inside our head. So we delete information, we distort it, we generalize things. Oh, they always do that to me. No, they don't always. And you know what they say? You shouldn't do that. Because they say, I read a report somewhere. It's on the internet. It's an Abraham Lincoln quote. So we never have anything other than our own creation of the world. As a human being, you can never ever have a one-to-one relationship with reality. It is always, there's that generalized absolute again. Let's say, more often than not, all you have is your interpretation and your perception of the world. So what do you do with that? When life shows up the way you don't want it to, what do you do with it? How do you change it?
Changing the thoughts. Perception. Mind.
Point of view is a big thing. Like the frame that you're looking at it in. Stephen Covey tells a story where he was on the subway and reading his paper. And at one stop, on piles on obviously a father and his 3 kids. Well, the father just kind of sits there and just kind of stares out the window. And the kids start running around all over the place, just screaming and picking on each other. And Stephen Covey's trying to ignore them while he's reading the paper. And finally, he can take it no more. And he says something, folds his paper up and says, "Don't you think you should do something about those children?" And it's almost like he woke this guy up. Oh, yeah. I imagine they just don't know how to handle it. Their mother just passed away an hour ago. We just came from the hospital. I don't know how to handle it. And right away, Stephen's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do?" So you change the frame around it, and suddenly it's completely different. The meaning switches. The situation didn't change, the lens from which he saw it through. Years ago, I worked with a woman, we'll call her Rachel. And I got along with Rachel real well. And I loved her. She was funny and outgoing. She was a little older than I was. Actually, she was a lot older than I was. But I didn't really know how old she was. I just knew that she'd been around longer than me. And one day, I said hi to her, and she's like, "Ugh." And that was the first day of more and more emotional abuse from Rachel. There'd be days where she'd be throwing things and cussing and mother this and like, oh, stay away from her. So it got to be where I didn't want to ask her anything. And when I would talk to her about her with other people, it was like, oh, she's being such a bitch. Like, it sucks to be around her. Like, I shy away from her. And then one day, she didn't come to work. And someone said, "Did you hear about Rachel?" I said, "No." Well, she died of brain cancer. She was diagnosed 8 months ago. And she didn't have time to die because she was taking care of her mother, who was also dying. So after her mom died, and she took care of all the arrangements, it was time for her to die. So in the meantime, she's extremely angry at the world. And when I found out, I chastised myself. I said, "Daniel, how dare you judge another person? You have no idea what shit they're walking through that day." Could be a father who just found out that his child is on drugs and doesn't know what to do. A whole host of possibilities. Someone could be going through a divorce, or like when people are angry, not that nice to be around. What's the enlightened approach?
Send them love.
Send them love. And we realize that even though it's not about us, that they're dealing with their own stuff, we can see the humanity, our humanity, in them. It elevates our consciousness. Now, one of the ways that we elevate our consciousness in our environment is by creating distinctions about our environment. When you're a kid, everything is like every woman is mommy, every man, daddy. Every tree, that's a brand new tree. That's a climbing tree. And as we navigate through life, we start creating more and more distinctions about our environment. Hot, cold, safe. Stay away. Oh, don't say that. Right? We learn how to navigate in our environment. So one of the ways that we can increase our conscious awareness is just by increasing our vocabulary. And start asking, what's this feel like? What's it compared to? How many of you are energy workers? How many of you would like to be energy workers? Everyone has the capacity to move energy. When you're learning, because energy is always around you, is start tuning into how you feel. And how does it feel compared to when it didn't? If you're developing your intuition, and you get the still small voice. It says, don't do that. It says, but I want to do that. Don't do that. And then you do it, and it doesn't work out. Then you remember the tone of that voice and how it felt. So the next time you hear it, it's like, oh, maybe I should listen. Have you ever heard of Falcon Ovens? It's a German firm. They make one of the most amazing ovens in the world. Now, if you get a job with Falcon Ovens, they don't put you on the line. They don't put you in an office the first day. No matter what job you have, you spend the next 8 months hammering metal, filing it, heating it, bending it. You become familiar with the metal. You have many, many distinctions about the metal. The more distinctions you have about your environment, the more you can manipulate it. Now, I said that I have a relationship to snow that a lot of Texans don't. How many words do you have for snow? How many of you are born in Texas? Oh, more than one. How many words do you have for snow?
It's either snow or ice.
Snow or ice. See, in Michigan we have powder, we have slush, we have packing snow, we have shoveling snow, it's ice, hail, sleet. Now there's crisp snow, like once it gets below 12 degrees. When you walk on it, it crunches. So I have many, many more distinctions about snow than you do. If you were an Eskimo, you would have upwards of 65 different words for snow because your life would depend on it. Now, all this stuff makes you more consciously aware of your environment. But to what end? Why is it important to be aware? Consciously aware. Pardon?
Survival.
Survival. Well, that's one. Be more aware of danger, be more aware of potential pitfalls.
Opportunity.
Be aware of opportunity. But to what end? Growth. See, on the spiritual path, we're on a path to how many would describe it as a path, as a journey? Because there's this feeling like here we are, but where we are isn't all there is. So maybe it's over there, or over there, or in that book, or this book, that teacher, or this teacher. And we describe ourselves as a seeker. I used to describe myself as a seeker for a long time. Then I really began to wondering, what am I seeking for? What do we seek for? This isn't TV. Anyone have an idea? What are you seeking for?
The truth,
Yeah,
Peace, truth. What truth?
the truth of who we are, where we're going, what's the purpose, like we talked about. Why am I here?
What would be the reason or one possibility why you are here?
To affect others, to be affected, learning.
Comic relief?
Remember.
If you are God incarnate, here in this big social experiment, wrapped up in this play of consciousness, you get to decide what your purpose is. You can create it. Because if you're an aspect of God, a mini God, mini all that is, the only thing that makes you mini, though, is your self-concept. In that aspect of creating and creating your environment, creating your reality. Because all you have is what you have in your head. And you recreate the world, your experience of the world. So you're always creating it. So when you begin to think different thoughts, how do you begin shifting your thoughts? You move them into alignment with the reality that you want. Because if you're in the reality that you don't want, these thoughts are creating this current moment. If you want a different moment, you can choose differently right now. It's in our attachment to our past. It's attachment to our programming. How do you know who you are? When you look in the mirror each morning or every so often, and you recognize that person, do you recreate that person based on what? Who you were yesterday? Like if you woke up in the morning and you didn't know who you were, and you looked in the mirror, oh, it's you. Like we're constantly recreating ourselves. You have the capacity to recreate yourself brand new at any given moment. Like you're carrying these bags, of all your stuff, so you know who you are. And you walk into this moment, and you're carrying your bags. And at any moment, you can drop these bags, drop your baggage. And step into the next moment, and you can say, who do I want to be now? Who do I want to be now? How do I want to affect the world? What do I want to create? As God, you have the whole field of possibility at your disposal. Infinite potential. The only thing that usually stops you from creating life the way you want it is the idea that you think you can't. And it's not so much that you haven't done it yet. I mean, we can use that excuse, well, I have never done it. I love the story of when the circus used to come to town, and when they would come in advance and they'd hire a bunch of the people in town to perform different functions. Well, this one circus needed a trombone player. And they advertised, and only one kid showed up. He says, oh, I'm so glad you came. Here's your horn. He says, I don't have a horn. So they gave him his horn. And so this is where you march. This is your uniform. Here's your music. And they start the parade, and they're going through town. You hear this, wow. And the band director comes back and pulls the kid out of line and says, what are you doing? What's that wailing? I thought you said you could play trombone. He says, I don't know. I never tried before. I figured, how hard could it be? So what have you not attempted because you've never done it before? Like, if you fall down, if you fail, you just get back up. I teach a workshop called Unleashed and Unstoppable with the firewalk. Just a stroll across 1,200-degree coals. So my definition of being unstoppable is that you get to decide. You choose. That if you get knocked down, you're going to get back up. You get knocked down, you're going to get back up. No matter how many times you fail, quote unquote, or you fail to achieve your result, it's, are you willing to get back up? The moment you say, nah, I'm done, you're done. You get to decide. Nobody else decides. That reminds me, I never turned down my phone. But consciousness is a difficult thing to talk about because my mind is, I set the title a couple months ago, and I have notes and notes and notes as ideas would come in, and then I could literally talk for 2 weeks. But this quote came to me on the way over. It's from T.S. Eliot. We shall not cease from our exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. This is, for me, the spiritual journey. It's connecting with and accepting your humanity, your animal aspect, and then rising above it. Is everyone familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs? He created that basically with a pyramid. At the very top is self-actualization. And it's a model of motivation for an organism. So he says, our first need that takes precedence over anything else is food and shelter, survival. When those are taken care of, then we'll move up the ladder and we start forming bonds and connection. Then it's important, we have a need for self-esteem and accomplishment. And it moves on up to the top, which is self-actualization, to feel fulfilled, that you are on purpose. Now this is the progression of what I consider the animal mind. That it's just a matter of course that once these things are fulfilled, then you can move to the next level. When I was in India, there's a whole group of sadhus, ascetics, people that have renounced material possessions, money and food and jobs, and it's like, that's not important. Yet, they're not sustained from that, like they've renounced it, yet they still beg outside their ashram for food and money. I had lunch a couple years ago with a young man who had just spent 10 days in a silence retreat, a meditation. And once he arrived, he didn't speak a word until he left. And he was refreshed. And he's sitting at the table and he was asked, why did you partake in this long meditation? He says, well, I'm trying to master being activated in the world. Like, I don't want to be activated. And I said, well, that's admirable. I've always wanted to do that, to go and not talk for 10 days. Well, it was probably just 10 minutes later, one of the other guys we were talking, because I'm a consulting hypnotist out in the world and peak performance coach. I utilize neuro-linguistic programming. So I work with people to move them to higher levels of performance. And the topic came up, how do I quit smoking? And he says, I don't really want to. But I know I should. And then they began this dialogue between them. And this man that did not want to get activated turned 5 shades of red, and his jugular was out there and up his forehead, and that because he was talking about how horrible it was to smoke and what it was going to do to your health. And this other guy said, well, I don't really want to quit, which just activated me even more. One of my early teachers said, it's easy to be a monk on the mountaintop. It's hard to be a saint in the marketplace. When we remove ourselves from relationship, we can be perfect. But in relationship with other people, there's the perfect mirror. They mirror to us everything we need to work on. Because the things that activate us in other people are the things we haven't dealt with. The things that just make you mad about the other person. Because once you deal with something, like you're complete with it, you put it behind you, you understood your mindset of when you were doing it and why you did it when you were doing it, and you vowed, you're just not going to do it anymore. Like me judging Rachel. Like when you accept it and drop it, you can recognize it in somebody else, but it doesn't activate you. Oh yeah, you're being judgmental. How can you be so judgmental? Like if I'm not complete with it, if I'm continually judging other people, I won't stand for it in other people. I will judge them for judging me. See, relationships we're a herd animal. We seek the companion of friendly animals. That's why we're all here. Kindred spirits. In a common conversation. Relationships are one of our greatest assets or accesses to a higher level of consciousness. If we view it that way. Like when something's going on between me and my beloved that I don't like, the first place I get to look is here. Not that I always look there first. But it comes back to me, okay, if I feel like I'm being criticized, I might ask myself, how am I criticizing other people? Where am I being a little judgmental? Where am I doing that for myself? See, it's never, whatever appears in the other person is what's inside you. It's what you're calling forth. I know it's hard to hear for some people. But it's for your own growth that you're bringing it into your, because you have a pattern that's outside your conscious awareness. Talking about conscious awareness and a gift from your other than conscious, can you give me one word?
Joy.
Joy. How about 2 words?
Love.
And one more?
Tyrannosaurus Rex.
All right. Joy, love, and Tyrannosaurus Rex. So, when you left the house, did you say, oh wait, I can't go because I got to write these 3 words down?
Nope, they just came to me.
They just came to you. Based on what? Based on a question. And then another part of you offered up words?
Yeah, look somewhere.
Okay, tell me, can you give me the definition of erdenus?
Nope.
Anybody? Erdenus. Now, Erdanus is a made-up word. But in that moment, that fast, you searched every word you ever heard, every word you ever read, every word you ever used, and every sounds like word, what it could be, that fast, and said, nope, I don't know what it is. Did you make a conscious decision that you didn't know it? Or was it like just offered up? Like, well, nothing here.
I could have made something up.
You could have, but I would have known. What you're currently consciously aware of is a gift from your other than conscious. Your other than conscious mind from a young child from age 1 to age 7, and primarily you're in a hypnagogic state, trance. You absorb a whole entire language. You learn how to dress. You learn how to eat. So from age 7, you're in this hypnagogic state, and then you start to become self-aware, and you start interacting more and more with your environment. And you start to generalize your experience. Instead of seeing distinct trees, you see trees. Instead of the climbing tree and that oak tree and that billy tree, it's like those are trees. We tend to generalize. So when you have an experience and something about you and it hurt and it's shameful, we make a decision in that moment that, like, about the world. We generalize it to, I'm never doing that again. And we string it out over time. And we relive that pain again and again. But it moves down in this realm of unconscious. And your programming, because you don't necessarily need to be consciously aware of it. Because at any given moment, there are millions and millions of stimuli going on all around you. There's air currents. The heat is going on and off. The air conditioning. There's someone breathing heavy in the back. Someone smiling up front. There's so many different stimuli to pay attention to that it overwhelms the conscious mind. The conscious mind, relatively speaking, is fairly small in its computing capacity. They've done a test, and somewhere they approximate the other than conscious mind, the subconscious, can process about 400 million bits of information every second, compared to only about 4 million of the conscious mind, which seems relatively a lot when you consider all the horsepower that's working for you behind the scenes. It's beating your heart. It's taking care of cells and building cells and getting rid of cells. Yet we think that conscious awareness or being consciously involved with our life is important. And that the subconscious is somehow below the conscious mind. How many people have heard that or have that belief maybe somewhere in there? No?
Not anymore.
Not anymore? The role between the conscious and the other than conscious is to create rapport, inner rapport. So when you get the inner voice, you listen. Most people aren't in touch with their intuition is because they've gotten the intuitive hit again and again and they've ignored it. And your other than conscious, if it is not listen, or if it's not being heard, it's going to stop offering up information in a way that can be easily heard. So we create a chasm between our conscious and our other than conscious. We create intentions and we get sabotaged along the way because we haven't made peace with our other than conscious mind and got it involved in our progress or in our attention. Now, talking about heat and cold, I used to be one of those idiots that would run around in November and December in their shorts. I was acclimated. I just put the mindset in that I was going to be okay. Sometimes I'd wear a jacket, and other times the more I was out in the cold, the more I could handle, the more I'd do with it. Now, in January, when it no longer was in the 20s and it got up like in the mid 30s, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like spring out. And I'd take my jacket off, and it would, like, I'd be bouncing around like, this is great. But it's all relative. I moved down here in 2007 in February. It was 17 degrees and a foot of snow in Michigan. Down here it was 70 degrees in February. I loved it. I spent the entire summer working outside in the yard. I put in a fountain, and that summer it was 109, 110 every day. And I'm loving the sun, I'm loving the heat, I'm drinking lots of water. I go back up to Michigan on Labor Day. It's 85 degrees. They're sitting around, oh my God, it's so hot. I got a jacket on. It's 20 degrees colder than I've experienced all summer long. It's like I could not get warm. And it was like, it's conditioning. I spent a month in the jungle in Honduras. And it was only 86 and 90 degrees, but humidity was 85 and 90%. So I would sweat, but it wouldn't cool me. And it took me 3 months to be able to walk into an air-conditioned room once I got back to the States without like shock, because they'd have it at 70 degrees. So adaptation is an integral part of being a human. We can tolerate amazing, uncomfortable situations if we have the mindset to. I've known people, women primarily, that are in a relationship that's physically abusive. They won't leave. Why won't they leave? They're not necessarily comfortable, but they're comfortable in a way because it's familiar.
Right. They fear the unknown.
Like, if they were to leave, what would I do? Where would I go? So it's, even though it's hell, I know the kind of hell I'm going to have. But I've developed from conversations like that, I developed a philosophy of life called the art of living dangerously. Nietzsche, one of my favorites, a German philosopher, said the joy of life is in living dangerously. So I define dangerously as doing anything consciously to move outside your comfort zone, or at least towards the edge. You don't have to step all the way out. You can step out and then jump back in. Because if we jump out, it's really, really uncomfortable. Because outside our comfort zone is the unknown. We like the known. As much as we say we like to explore the unknown, and sometimes we say, if someone says, I'll give you spiritual transformation right now. Will you take it? And a lot of people, yeah, give it to me. Well, in 1988, I was high atop the Renaissance Center in downtown Detroit, in a revolving restaurant, having drinks. And I was together with a friend of mine. We would get together every time at New Year's and go over the previous year and talk about what worked and what we accomplished and what we wanted to create the next year. Well, this is our third year getting together, and I realized sitting there that I had just taken the previous 2 years and moved them into my third year, accomplishing very little of what I really wanted to do. I said, I'm in a rut. Well, as soon as I said, I'm in a rut, somewhere in my files, I remembered my sociology professor, Bill Cody, who really looked like Wild Bill Cody. He said, if you ever find your life in a rut, start a revolution with your life. I said, that's it. This is Revolution 88. Everything, I'm going to create a revolution with my life. I declared it. Like it was this year. That was the theme of the year, Revolution 88. Be careful what you declare. I changed jobs. My marriage ended. I changed where I was living. I ended up getting rid of everything I owned. It was uncomfortable. But I also walked on coals for the first time. I thought, I declared a revolution and I get in the mail. First time ever, the opportunity to walk on burning hot coals. I'll do it! And since then, I've walked nearly 600 times over the last 20-some years. There is something in it that is amazing and valuable for you. But it took me much longer to realize it's not in the walking on the coals. That's the big deal. Like you get yourself in a focused state, your body is amazing. It'll do that. It's like, you know, once you do it, the novelty of it falls off. The real value in it is when you're standing in front of 1,200-degree coals, when do you take the first step? How do you know you're ready?
When you're not afraid.
But actually, that fear is you want that. It always scared me, because I've taught it for many years. It scares me when people say, I'm not afraid of the coals. Because then they have a lack of respect for it, because it is hot, and it will burn, if you take it for granted. But it's courage, which is a slap in the face of fear. And it's also, where's your focus? If you have the 1,200-degree coals in front of you, and you feel the fear, your focus is on burning. So I want to focus on my intention, which is to walk to the other side. And then I align my heart and my mind with that intention. Why did I come here? I came here to walk to the other side. Then the coals just become incidental to my experience. Just something to get through. Like that door right there, that is an obstacle. It prevents me from going outside. How many of you, like, it's not locked. How many of you would perceive that as being an obstacle? It's just something to handle. When we experience an obstacle in life, it's not really an obstacle. Like, who's creating this experience? You are. If you call it an obstacle, it's an obstacle. If it's just something to handle, it's just something to handle. See, begin to pay attention to your language and how you talk about your experience. But in this year of the revolution, like, transformation is not comfortable. The idea of it seems amazing. Because you get like a higher and more lofty awareness, an experience of life, your relationships blossom. But if the transformation's here and you're here on this journey, something has to shift, something has to change. And more than likely, this is in the realm of my familiar. So the art of living dangerously is consciously stepping outside your comfort zone and learning to feel comfortable, feeling a little uncomfortable. And knowing that uncomfortableness as the spice of life, because that's when you're growing. That's when you're expanding. So what happened in the 88, when I declared this revolution, is I became certified in neurolinguistic programming that summer also. And a lot of my false beliefs began to fall away. And someone that was in the course talked about her guru. And I'm like, I want to meet a guru. I'm from Michigan. There's no gurus in Michigan. And she said, there is a big celebration on Labor Day. Can you come back? I said, I'll be there. And so we went up to this ashram in South Fallsburg, New York. And I met the guru. And it was, you know, I don't know, 2,000 to 3,000 people. Felicia Rashad was there, and a bunch of movie stars. And all the men were on one side, all the women were on the other side. And it's the same guru that's mentioned in, I didn't read the book. Peace, Eat, Pray, Love. Eat, Pray, Love. So she never mentions her in there, so I'm not going to mention her either. But when she walked in, you knew that this was somebody that was different. There was an aura, there was a carriage. And she sat and people sang and people chanted, and then they have this, what they call a darshan line, and where people come together and they kneel down and they bow, and she's like looking and just waving this big peacock feather, ostrich plume, back and forth. And my friend introduced me and said this was my first time here, and she looked at me and it was like this look of consternation and disgust. But all I could feel was this unconditional love for this woman. And I couldn't explain it. And we finished up and it was great, and we left and I flew back to Michigan. Well, that next day, on Tuesday, I fall asleep. And then I begin dreaming about driving around the Catskills. And then I see the guru's face like filling up the sky. And then these two hands come to the roof of the car and yank me out. And I'm suspended in midair in what I thought was a dream. And then this big bolt of light hit me in the chest and shot out through every cell in my body. That would be enough. But when that shot through me, I was writhing in bed in ecstasy and joy. And then I was out of my body, looking at myself, going, oh, that's interesting. Then I was back in my body. And then I was at the foot of the bed, looking at myself, writhing in bed. Then I was back in my body, experiencing that joy. And then I was out, up in the corner, looking down. And I was back in my body. And then I shot out, and I was just flying through space. And I encountered a consciousness or an intelligence that downloaded. It felt like the Matrix, where they're like downloading information. And then I ended up waking up in bed. And the first thing I thought, whoa, what a dream. The mattress was soaked all the way through. I was in this calm, sublime feeling, serene. I had no way of really explaining my experience. And probably 2 or 3 days later, I was on the phone with my friend back in New York saying, oh man, I had this wild dream. And she said, what you had was a classic Shaktipad experience, or the awakening of the Kundalini. And I wondered, what did I do to get that gift? If you listen to the camp of the guru, like you've done much work over many lifetimes. But the awakening of the Kundalini is just the beginning. And what happens in this awakening is that the spiritual energy begins to go through you. After that happened, I could hear other people's thoughts, and I could feel their own disgust for themselves, their own criticisms, and it was hard to handle. So I had to learn how to separate between me and other people. Now I can empathize on demand. And I also pick up things like if it's coming in too much, then now this is something that everybody can do. And with training, that empathy is easy to start to pick up. A lot of people think, well, I can't, or I haven't done it yet. But you can be psychic. Now, as you spiritually unfold, there is an awakening of the spiritual powers. They call them the cities. The ability to heal, clairvoyance, transportation, shape-shifting. Now, the warnings from the cities, or the siddhas, the gurus, is that, this is the way Baba Muktananda said it. He said, don't get caught up in the cities or the spiritual powers as an end. Because that's like stopping to play in a mud puddle on your way to the ocean. I think it was said best in The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. Seek not to be extraordinary among normal people. Seek to be normal among extraordinary people. I noticed synchronicity started to speed up. And at first it was like, ooh, isn't that cool? Then I learned, like, the more that novel I make synchronistic events appear in my experience, the more I'm projecting that it's not normal. So I began expecting synchronicity to show up. And so when synchronicity isn't showing up, I realize I'm doing something that's not connecting me energetically to what I need and what I want to create. Now, everything we've talked about so far in conscious awareness is how to navigate, for the most part, your existence on the planet and in relationship with other people. Now, connecting to all that is possible. When you meditate and you have that sense of pure bliss, if you can reach that state where it's almost like you stop breathing and you're aware of this very intense bliss and joy, that is your connection to all that is. And then that's why we meditate, to train the mind. The Buddha said the mind is like a monkey, always running here, running there. And what we want to do as a meditator is take the monkey, run him up the tree and down the tree, up the tree and down the tree, up the tree and down the tree until the monkey gets bored. Meditation is mind training. To quiet the mind is not the end, it's to subdue the mind. Because what's available is all that is. Baba Muktananda also said that in order to find God, one must lose their mind. Which at first glance sounds scary. But the truth is that you cannot experience God, all that is, God, Goddess, all that is, with your mind. Conceptually, it doesn't fit. Think of the grandest, most amazing conception of God, Goddess, all that is in your mind, and it's not big enough. When you're living in the moment and you're just present and aware. The moment you start thinking about this moment, you're no longer in the moment. So in order to live in the moment, you have to suspend thought. You're just present. You're not judging it. You're not comparing it or quantifying it. It just is what it is. This is, for me, what the end game is. This is something that I co-opted from Kalu Rinpoche. His was much shorter. His was like 4 lines. Mine's like 25. And I call it the grand illusion. The last time I talked here, it was the grand illusion, the unreality of your reality. So this is the grand illusion. The idea that the way the world is what you've come to know it to be. Beyond this veil of illusion, at the center of your being, you have a knowing, a sense that there is something else. A something that lies just beyond your grasp. This is why you are restless, quietly unsettled in your human life. You call yourself a seeker. You seek for this something else. That's something more. But you know not for what you really seek. You seek to know who you really are. You seek the direct experience of the greater reality. To experience the expanse of the possible you. The challenge is there is no path for this journey, and you must wander past your concepts of mind and leave the realm of what you think you know. Without the mechanism of your mind, this reality has no meaning, no purpose. It just is. When one completely surrenders the mind, you will know that you are nothing. And in being nothing, you are one with everything. You can be anything. At the center of your being, you are nothing. And in that nothing, no thingness is all possibility. Your way of being is more important than the goals and objectives. The strategies and tactics that you have, you can have be the worst person in the world and have amazing goals. But if you're the most amazing person that you can be, everything you do will be amazing. And you will be pulled towards those things that fulfill and validate you being amazing. So it's a self-perpetuating creative cycle. Most of us create goals and intentions, yet we don't factor in how we have to be in relationship to that goal in order to fulfill it. Like just standing in front of the fire. I have to be a firewalker in order to walk across. There's a certain way of holding my body. There's a certain way I move. I just don't wander around. So it's in that beingness, like how do you want to be in the world? That's more important than you can be love and joy, because that is actually a beingness. Because some of those things, those concepts of mind, we use love and honesty and trust and spirituality as as nouns, but they're actually verbs. We can lead a spiritual life. We can't attain spirituality. I can't pull like 5 cc's of love out of my pocket. I can't point to it on the ground and say, there it is, or pull it around in a wagon. Now, people fall in love, but it's in joy. I can be in joy. And if I align my heart and my mind as being in joy, then no matter what comes up, I'm not this Pollyanna, like, oh, everything's just fine. I can be with misery, yet have the music of joy playing in the background, knowing that it's gonna see me on the other side. The human body has about 50 trillion cells. You also have another 100 trillion bacteria and microbiome that lines your intestines. Now, each one of those singular cells is a sentient entity. You can take it out of your body and put it in the appropriate medium, and it will duplicate and live outside of you. So they eat, they procreate, they eliminate, they communicate. There's a little field of consciousness, bioelectrical field in that cell that fluctuates, that brings nutrients in and out. That's how it gets food in and out. Now, each one of those cells is a little field of consciousness. 50 trillion cells, you have a field of consciousness. Just for reference, $1 trillion stacked one on top of each other would reach 14 stories high and cover an entire football field 14 stories high. That's $1 trillion. You have 50 trillion plus another 100 trillion. So you have a field of consciousness. This is your subconscious that communicates consciously or with conscious intention. The only role of the conscious mind is to set yourself in a direction. What kind of car do you buy? Where do you want to eat? And then you start getting offers. Give me a word. Give me it up. So your conscious mind sets you in a direction. Create a revolution for my life. And then it puts me in the right place at the right time. Now, this is also in the realm of in my little field. Now, my heart energy has been measured, not just mine, but people's energy, to extend the electromagnetic radiance from 8 to 25 feet out in front of the body. So our heart energy right now is intermingling. If just one of you was not present in this audience, it would be a different talk. Because your consciousness, your offering, would not be here. And the fact that you are here, it makes it this conversation and no other conversation. Now, if my heart radiates 8 to 25 feet out and yours is doing the same thing, and then we have auric fields, and we're intermingling our energetic fields. We're sharing a level of consciousness. Now, this happens not only between people, but between things, and because everything is energy. And what is energy? It's information. So quantum physics have shown that we can interact with particles at a distance. That just our intention in our observation of a particular experiment will alter the way a particle behaves at the subatomic level. So we have conscious mind, subconscious, and then other than conscious. So when I refer to other than conscious, it's kind of like a catch-all reference to my subconscious, conscious, and then everything else. Because I have received inspiration and not know where it comes from. There are documented studies after study that shows that there's a team of people working here on a particular problem, and another team, another part of the world working on the same problem, and they make similar breakthroughs at the same time, or relatively close to each other. There is a project that's sponsored by the Institute of Noetic Sciences called the World Consciousness Project. And what they have are random event generators posted all over the world. Because random event generators spit out ones and zeros randomly. So what they look for is any coherence in the number generation. And they see it time and time again in world events. There's coherence. The greatest amount of coherence to date was 9/11. Now get this. Coherence began 24 hours before the first strike. Like, we knew something was going to happen. And then peaked up to 24 hours after. The tsunamis, the world earthquakes, those also. Like, it's an outpouring of our heart. It affects the mass consciousness. In the book in the back there, that's written by Tali Burkan, there's a section on how to influence a slot machine and use it as a biofeedback device. Slot machine is nothing more than a random event generator. How you're being with it makes a difference. There's mass consciousness where we can communicate with any other person or being or population on the planet. If you read David Hawkins, who talks about that one great spiritual leader can balance energetically a whole population. 2 or 3 of them on the planet, and it holds the planet in balance between the lower conscious activity, the violence, and the higher. So the reason I'm up here and I do the things that I do and the talks I do, it's that my mission on the planet, my purpose for life, is that I want each and every person on the planet to have an experience of peace, love, and joy that's readily available to you in your experience of life. And that you get to your bones, that you create your reality, and that you have a choice on how today's going to go. And that if you work on yourself, if you're the greatest you that you can be for you, because who else are you with 24/7, 365? Do you treat yourself like you're $1 million baby? Or something less than? Would you treat a $2 dog better than yourself? Make sure that they eat every day, they get out for a walk. Do you get yourself out for exercise? So by doing that for you, you make it available for everybody else through mass consciousness. You want world peace? Be peaceful here. You want a world that's filled with love? Fill your world. Be a spreader of love and joy. See the greatness in somebody else. Treat them like they are potential unlimited. Just in treating and seeing that in somebody else, it changes not only you, but it changes them. Because then you become a perfect mirror for them that they can live into. Because maybe they don't see it for themselves yet. Yes?
I really like your message. And I have sort of, my situation is, I was really expanded for years and traveled, and every week was a different music festival and stuff like that. So my life was just miracle after miracle, and really interacting with the world. But now I moved back here to be close to my dad. He's aging, and I'm in a lease and householding and stuff, and I really feel like squished back in a box. And so I always fantasize about getting another motorhome and taking off, but how would you give any advice for expanding and contracting, and how to deal with it?
Well, expanding and contracting comes from here. It's the thoughts that, how do I think about my situation? Do I feel trapped? Do I feel confined? Am I creating my experience that way? Or we can ask, how can I create freedom and joy inside this environment? Because I have a responsibility that I've taken on here. It's how to be a saint in the marketplace. It's easy to be a saint running around here and new experiences and doing that. Going back to T.S. Eliot, it's coming back to our beginning and knowing it for the first time. You don't have to go anywhere or do anything to connect with all that is. You just release the boundaries or release the constraints that you've put on it right in front of you. And the universe will roll down and bow at your feet. So it's, how can I be the greatest expression of myself inside of this? Like maybe you can create a group. Maybe you can bring people over. Maybe, you can invite musicians over to play in your backyard. Now, is your dad confined to a wheelchair or bed?
No, he's just like off and on. Like he had cancer, but then after I got here, he healed. So he's actually doing okay right now. So I'm just kind of like, do I stay or should I go? Or
Well, the question is, where are you seeking your fulfillment? Is it in external events taking place, or is it from inside?
I do a lot of inside, but I really like the external.
Ice cream tastes wonderful. Now, sometimes I can make broccoli as amazing as ice cream. Or Brussels sprouts.
I love Brussels sprouts.
But as a kid, I never did that. We create our interpretations. We create our world. So if you're feeling constrained, take responsibility for it. How can I generate more joy, more freedom, more excitement right here, right now? Because wherever you go, there you are. And when your joy and your love is portable, then you're not dependent upon other people and events to fulfill that for you. One more question.
I know you've already touched on this somewhat, but I wonder if you could get a little more specific about intimate connections. And for me, I've got to do one-on-one. I can't do a general thing. But, such a connection that's intimate and meaningful, that there is an energy flow between two people that maybe is a sense above our five senses.
You'll never know for sure. Because all you have is your interpretation of what's going on. And if you say, I love you, and the other person says, I love you, even though you say the same words, you have different criteria for what love means than that person does. Like they have their own references, they have their own past, they have their own, there can be some close approximation. And that's why we're in relationship, because to share that. But to reduce it down to something that's more mundane, everybody uses everybody for mutual benefit. And when it doesn't work for the other person, they end up leaving. And a lot of times, if you think it's wonderful and great, it's not necessarily wonderful and great for the other person in the same capacity. So there is a feeling level, there is a reciprocating of information, but ultimately, you'll never truly know, because all you have is your experience. So one of the ways you do is you keep testing it. You ask, when they say I love you, what do you mean by that? What do you love about me? What's showing up that tells you that you love me? Is it in the sound that I hear of my voice? Is it in the touch? So you can actually pull out how the other person codes their experience, so you can get a better approximation, clearer distinctions about what's going on in the other person. Does that make sense? Two quick things. I do have a couple things in back there. There's, I've done some MP3s over the years, hypnosis, and there's a meditation autogenic training, which teaches your mind-body communication. There's also a mind trip, which is a 60-minute hypnotic conversation. And it's designed to amplify your own best attributes. There's nothing programmed in there other than to create the space of possibility and healing for yourself. So you can check those out. There's some bundled prices. The Tali Burkhan book is great for using experiences of life. It's called Extreme Spirituality. He's the one that taught me firewalking. But it's in reading about these different activities where you can become present and take the conscious awareness lessons that you can cultivate out of everyday experience. And that's only $5 a day. So if you check it out, I'll be back there. And we're going to Applebee's afterwards. How many people? You want everyone to come?
Everybody that wants to be there.
Everybody that wants to come.
We'll talk about that in a minute.
And I'm excited to hear Elizabeth play again. So thank you very much.